The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
Welcome to True Crime Stories Hub. Today we will discuss another terrible true crime documentary in which husband betrayed his wife and killed his 3 sons. Something horrible occurred in a world where kids should feel secure and cherished by their parents. 3 little boys, Hunter, age 4, Clayton, age 7, and Chase, age 3, had their lives brutally taken on June 15, 2023. This tragic event was caused by their 32-year-old father, Chad Doorman, who shocked the country by being implicated in the killings of his own children. Every scene, from the vicious act of killing their children to later resting peacefully on the porch, tells a terrifying story of tragedy. On June 15, 2023, a father's love in the sleepy Ohio hamlet of Monroe devolved into a violent act. The mother and the community were shocked and incredulous after the needless deaths of 3 young boys. The father, Chad Doorman, was accused of this heinous act. He admitted to his crimes at first, but subsequently entered a not guilty plea, which increased the enigma around his role and motivation. Unsettling information about the incident surfaced as the investigation went on, creating a terrifying portrait of a father's decline into unimaginable violence. The world watches with apprehension as the court processes unfold, seeking answers to the lingering issue of what could motivate a parent to perpetrate such a heinous crime against his own children and hoping for justice for the innocent lives lost. Laura, 34, was the spouse of Chad Christopher Doorman, 32, of Claremont County, Ohio. Alexis, their adolescent stepdaughter, was 16 years old. Hunter, Clayton, and Chase are the names of Chad and Laura's 3 little sons, ages 3, 4, and 7, who have always remained together and are avid sports fans. The boys were adorable and amusing. While Chad worked to provide for the family, their mother, Laura, stayed at home. They resided in a modest 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home in New Richmond, a Claremont County tiny town of roughly 2,800 inhabitants along the Ohio River. Before tragedy hit, their family was just like any other. Chad therefore arrived home from work a little earlier than normal on June 15, 2023. He then invited his wife, Laura, and their 3 sons to join him in their bedroom so that he could snooze with his family. They were all sitting together, laughing and chatting, enjoying themselves. Laura had no idea, however, that those happy times would eventually give way to unspeakable horror. Chad got up and opened the gun safe, which was next to their bed, after they had been talking and joking for a few minutes. He filled the magazine of his Marlin Model HC-22 rifle and fired 2 rounds at his 4-year-old son, Hunter. In the family room, his daughter Alexis was watching TV when she heard a gunshot. She rushed to the main bedroom to find out what had transpired. When she arrived at the doorway, she saw her brother being shot, which was a terrible sight. Alexis felt frightened. Turning, she fled as quickly as she could. Laura ran to help her child Hunter as she was with her children. Then, to save their lives, she yelled at the other children to flee. Alexis saw the eldest son sprinting into a field through the wrong door. She yelled at him to continue running. He shot his 7-year-old son Clayton in a matter of seconds while Chad was pursuing him. Chad stood behind Clayton as he collapsed to the ground, heavily bleeding, as though he had succeeded. All of that was happening to Alexis. Desperate to save their lives, she was appalled and rushed to the house, snatched her youngest brother, and raced to safety. Chad rushed to Alexis, grabbed her, brandished his gun, and pleaded with her to put Chase, age 3, down. In addition to pleading with Chad to stop shooting her, Alexis sobbed. Fortunately, Chad ran out of ammunition before he could shoot her in the head. Alexis hurried to the fire station at that precise moment and stopped a woman who was walking past her residence. She informed the woman that her stepfather had murdered every member of her family. At 4:15 p.m., the woman then dialed 911. Chase, who was 3 at the time, went back to his mother. Abruptly, Chad and Laura began to quarrel over Chase. When Chad attempted to remove Chase from Laura's embrace, she clung to him in an attempt to keep him safe. Then, shockingly, Chad bit Laura before firing the rifle by pressing it against her thumb. Laura left Chase because she was seriously injured. After shooting Chase in the head, Chad lined up the 3 children's lifeless bodies. He killed them all and then sat quietly on his front porch, as nothing had occurred. Laura kept calling for assistance while she was inside the house. The cops arrived at the area at 4:25 p.m. following the 911 call. Chad was sitting on his home's porch with a firearm next to him when the police arrived. He was swiftly apprehended by the police and put in handcuffs. Chad didn't object to being bound and seemed at ease. One police cared for the 3 victims while the other kept him under control. Despite paramedics' best efforts, the children's gunshot wounds ultimately caused their deaths. Laura's injuries were later treated at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. Alexis, the stepdaughter of Chad Doorman, was fortunate to have survived the shooting. She had gotten out of the house somehow. Chad was taken into custody at 4:27 p.m. on June 15, 2023, the day he murdered his 3 sons. He was remarkably composed and courteous when the police officers apprehended him, acting as if nothing had occurred. He was later arrested for further interrogation and examination. Chad Doorman told authorities during the interrogation that he had been plotting the murders since October 2022. Chad also admitted to the investigators that the idea of killing his own sons had kept him up for 3 or 4 days. His mental state before the fatal events was disturbingly depicted by these findings. As the inquiry proceeded, officials looked into Chad's possible history of general violence. They looked through his phone logs as well. He primarily had traffic infractions in Claremont County, with the exception of one instance involving criminal damage when he was 18, according to the records. In 2010, he was also charged with choking his father, Keith Doorman, in a domestic violence case. When Keith Doorman did not show up to testify for the prosecution, the matter was later withdrawn. These documents shed light on Chad's prior encounters with the county's law enforcement and his legal background. Richard Kincannon, one of the neighbors, told a television program that he was upset every day while the probe was underway. He would constantly yell at his wife and children outside. He was furious, shouting at his wife, dogging her, devaluing her, and devaluing the children on a daily basis. Just furious. And if they didn't follow his instructions, which I have personally witnessed, I never imagined he would. In an interview with the news channel, the 911 caller claimed to be fleeing with a small black lab and yelling, "Call 911, call 911. My stepfather is shooting everyone in my household," she claims. Additionally, investigators looked for any indications of financial issues. The website of the county auditor informed them that Doorman paid $75,000 in 2016 for his 3-acre converted mobile house. Records show that he paid property taxes through 2023, suggesting that there were no apparent problems with mortgage payments. Detectives also spoke with Chad's father, Keith Doorman, 59. When he learned what his child had done, he was completely stunned. "I'm still trying to understand," he told the investigators. According to Keith Doorman, He was shocked that his child had committed such a terrible act. He went so far as to say that he was unable to cope with things in his life. "I am unable to speak to him. I have no answers because they won't let me speak to him. He most likely kept a lot of things from me." His father, who was deeply distressed by the incident, sadly described him as a good boy. "I don't know if it was financial," he replied. "Whether it was mental is unknown to me. I'm not sure if it had anything to do with work. I'm not sure." He even highlighted that his son had never run afoul of the law and called him a fun-loving man. Although both cases were dropped for unspecified reasons, his son had previously run afoul of the law, thus his father's assertion was a little deceptive. When the killings were announced, the neighborhood was rocked. Surprisingly, neighbors said they never thought Chad would do such things. On social media and in interactions with neighbors, he had portrayed himself as a wonderful and loving parent, and they stated that they were not searching for any other suspects. They concentrated all of their research on Chad Doorman in an effort to learn more about the circumstances and motivations behind the terrible event that involved his kids. Chad first entered a guilty plea and admitted to all of his crimes during questioning. But on June 23, 2023, at the initial court appearance, he pleaded not guilty to the charges against him and insisted on his innocence. Later, on Friday, June 23rd, Chad appeared somewhat distressed during his court appearance. As prosecutors discussed the horrific events of June 15th, he sobbed while wearing a green bulletproof vest. David Gast, the Claremont County Municipal Court top prosecutor, revealed troubling information on the case during the hearing. Chad had meticulously orchestrated the events, he said. He disclosed that one of Chad's kids had attempted to flee from him in a neighboring field, but Chad had pursued and apprehended the boy, bringing him back to the yard where he and his brothers were slaughtered. The suffering this individual has caused to his family, community, law enforcement, first responders, and the rest of us is unimaginable. Gast went on to say, "In this instance, there has been a complete admission. It's still a new case. Although we are continually learning new data, it is impossible to comprehend the awful horror of what we already know." He referred to the murders of Chad's sons as one of the most heinous, lustful, and cowardly things we will ever witness. The judge received all of the facts from a bill of particulars that was filed in Claremont County. The prosecutor read loudly every occurrence that occurred. Chad reportedly admitted to the detectives that he had plotted the murders. The prosecutor said that Chad lined up the boys and shot them. According to the prosecutor, their mother was also shot in the hand when she attempted to stop him. According to the prosecutor, Chad, the father, was shot 9 times, resulting in severe injuries. 2 of the boys were shot 4 times each, while one youngster was struck once. Mark Teklov, the prosecutor, described to the judge how brutally Chad murdered his 3 sons. He claimed that the community and family were shocked by the heinous crime. Furthermore, according to the prosecutor, Chad even admitted to the murder and said, "I did it. Put me in jail. It was wrong of me to do that. It was wrong of me to shoot them." Additionally, prosecutor Mark Teklov informed the judge that Chad had entered a guilty plea while being questioned, which is why he intended to execute him. Mark Teklov, the prosecutor in this case, has stated unequivocally that he will not accept anything less than the execution of Chad Doorman. "This is by far the most sickening, horrifying crime I have seen," Teklov told a TV outlet following the court session. "I can only imagine how terrified these young boys must have been to see their father, who was supposed to be protecting them, killing them. In my office, we will exert every effort to ensure that this defendant never again sees the light of day. I want to begin by first and foremost expressing my sincere condolences for this family and this unimaginable sorrow," Since this is a capital case and my objective is to have this man put to death for killing these 3 little boys, I can't go into too many comics, although we do have some. Teklov stated that he wants this perpetrator who killed these 3 innocent boys put to death. He committed an unfathomable act of horror against the family. At first, Chad was charged with 21 different offenses in connection with the terrible events on June 15, 2023. He was specifically charged with the execution-style shooting and killing of 3 young children: Hunter, age 4, Clayton, age 7, and Chase, age 3. A grand jury has now indicted Doorman on 21 counts, including 4 counts of felonious assault, 8 acts of kidnapping, and 9 counts of aggravated murder. If found guilty of these counts, he may now be subject to the death penalty. At first, he was charged with 4 counts of felonious assault, 8 acts of kidnapping, and 9 counts of aggravated murder. The gravity of the accusations made against Chad Doorman in relation to the untimely deaths of his children is reflected in these grave charges. Judge Jason Nagel of the Claremont County Municipal Court determined that Chad should remain in the Claremont County Jail and imposed a $20 million bail amount. Bonds of $20 million in cash or surety will be issued at this time. And now, Mr. Gaston, anything else? Judge, no. Calman, Mr. Calman, is there anything else? Nothing right now. According to reports, Chad Doorman's $20 million bond was the biggest amount ever set in the history of the county. Chad Doorman's attorney asked the court to remove the death sentence from consideration during a different hearing, claiming that Chad was suffering from a severe mental condition at the time he shot and killed his 3 sons on June 15, 2023. More than 9 months after Claremont County prosecutors claimed that Chad Doorman executed his 3 small sons, he has now repled guilty by reason of insanity. Additionally, experts will now examine Doorman's mental condition at the time of the murder once more. Executing someone who is significantly mentally ill is cruel and unusual punishment that violates both the Ohio and U.S. constitutions, according to Chad's attorney. Those who were afflicted with severe mental illness at the time of the alleged conduct are not held to the same standard of moral responsibility as others. Due of his insanity, Doorman has pleaded not guilty. However, the prosecution has asked for a mental assessment. A court hearing to address the attorney's request was later scheduled for May 3, 2024. In order to bolster their argument that Chad was mentally ill at the time of the crime, Chad's attorneys had committed to delivering a report from a mental health specialist by June 3, 2024. Chad's attorneys said in court during a subsequent hearing in March 2024 that the deputies of the Claremont County Sheriff's Office violated his Miranda rights upon his arrest. A judge has decided to reject the confession that Chad Doorman purportedly made while being questioned. When police omitted portions of the Miranda warnings, and when detectives persisted in interviewing Chad Doorman after he requested legal representation, the judge declared on Friday that the defendant's rights had been violated twice. Police officers who responded to the site were among the witnesses the prosecution called. They were questioned about their interactions with Chad. According to the prosecutors, almost every conversation Chad had with detectives and sheriff's deputies was captured on camera. Claremont County Deputy Chad Poffman, a dog handler, was the first witness to appear in court. He was the first officer on the scene, according to Deputy Poffman. The defendant was sitting on the porch with a firearm when he initially arrived to Chad's house. Chad yelled some things that the deputy couldn't understand as they drove to the sheriff's station. But at one point, the deputy claimed to have heard Chad say, "Take me to jail," rather clearly. In the courtroom, Claremont County Sheriff's Office Detective Michael Ross was also questioned. He claimed that before the investigator finished reading the rights, Chad responded, "Yep," indicating that he understood what was being read to him. He claimed that Chad denied killing his sons on multiple occasions while being questioned in the interrogation room. He later mentioned something, though, that Detective Ross claimed he thought was crucial. During his testimony, Chad brought up the Bible. Detective Ross recalled something significant that Chad had said. According to the Bible, you should kill your firstborn, secondborn, and thirdborn children, he stated. You murder your wife first, though. My wife wasn't killed by me. Court filings state that when the interrogation began, Chad requested a representation, but the investigator ignored his request. With the possible exception of the detectives involved, everyone is aware that a test does not begin when a suspect expressly states, "I want a lawyer," during a custodial interrogation. That is not the beginning of an officer asking a detective to question a lawyer about their name, rank, and serial number. They cease at that point. Additionally, according to the motion to suppress, Detective Ross left Chad alone for a bit before coming back to resume questioning him as though Chad hadn't requested legal representation. Later, the defense attorney questioned Detective Ross about whether he had fully explained Chad's Miranda rights to him. Ross said he hadn't, but he thought he had addressed the most significant points. Okay, so you went over the Miranda rights in brief. Did you not read all of the Miranda warnings listed on State's Exhibit 3? On your card? No, word for word. You did, however, omit a few really significant details. Did you? Following a protracted court session, the judge determined that the investigators' June 2023 arrest of Chad was illegal. Chad's Miranda rights were not upheld, according to Judge Richard Ferentz. During his 3-hour interrogation session, Chad requested a counsel at least twice, according to his attorneys, but the police disregarded his request and continued questioning him. Additionally, according to the attorney, Chad entered a guilty plea earlier as a result of pressure from investigators. The judge later ruled that Chad's remarks made during the interrogation would not be used in the subsequent court proceedings since the detectives had not adequately explained his rights to him. This ruling limited the evidence that could be used against Chad, which had an impact on how his trial would go. The trial became more complicated as a result of this legal twist, which also made the case take longer to resolve and increased public interest in the verdict. Doorman's case is set for trial in July, and if found guilty, he might be executed. However, this new decision may change that. This is huge news and might prove crucial to the case. Just before the year anniversary of the sad events, on June 14th, Chad will have his last court appearance. It is anticipated that his trial will begin on July 8, 2024. In essence, we're considering the period from July 8th to August 2nd. What then was the reason for his murders? The reason for his acts has not yet been ascertained by the authorities. It's unclear why Chad shot Clayton, Hunter, and Chase, but some people think he did it to harm his 34-year-old wife because he thought she was unfaithful, though this hasn't been proven. A ride in remembrance of the Doorman boys. Hundreds of individuals attended this fundraiser earlier today, with all proceeds going to the participants' families. The community believes that this fundraising is the very least they can do while the boys' father awaits trial for their deaths. A bike through New Richmond for 15 miles. As you can see, there are almost 1,000 people here to collect money for. The family, Alan Easterday, planned a tribute motorcycle, jeep, and car excursion that drew more than 100 people. On June 26th, the 3 boys were honored with another memorial service. As requested by the family, members of the community assembled at First Baptist Church of Glen Estee wearing vibrant clothing. Additionally, the community is still having difficulty understanding the shootings and the 3 innocent lives lost 24 hours later. There is no indication that the outpouring of support for first responders, classmates, relatives, and friends will stop in Monroe Township. Jatera McGee of WLWT News 5 is live in Monroe Township, where Many people have gathered to honor the 3 lost young boys since the awful incident. The oldest boy's former primary school hosted a special candlelight vigil as one of these services. To assist with covering the costs of the funerals for the 3 departed children, co-funding organizer Rachel Brown launched a GoFundMe campaign. Nearly $180,000 has been donated thus far, greatly above the original target. Richard Brown brought up In a post, Rachel Brown said that the mother of the children was like a sister to her. "My sister lost her 3 wonderful babies yesterday," she wrote. "There is nothing that can improve this. It's never going to be all right." However, if you feel moved to contribute to lessening the financial strain of this tragedy, please do so. This should never have to happen to anyone. I know you're wondering where Chad Doorman is these days. There are still a lot of unanswered concerns regarding his case, and he is being held at the Claremont County Jail. For what reason did he do that? How could someone so viciously murder their own children? Although the answers to these concerns are yet unknown, the community is optimistic that justice will be done and the truth will come to light. The death of these 3 little boys is still being processed by the community. Everyone is looking for a means to become better and go on. People's quest for justice unites them as the legal process progresses. The sad incidents have also sparked conversations about mental health, family dynamics, and mutual support throughout communities. In order to support the remaining family members and ensure that this type of incident never occurs again, people are banding together.